We're still recording, right? Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened to the internet there. Are we still recording? Yeah, we are. Okay, good. I just have to reshare the screen. Okay, yeah. First of all, just a background piece of information here, which we're not going to dwell on. This is just a basic Mishlei premise, which I also have an article on if you want more proof, is that in Mishlei, many times when it talks about Hashem, it's referring to just all things that are outside of your bechirah. Okay, and the most explicit reference to that is the Me'iri on 10:3, which I'm not going to go through the whole thing. The pasuk says, "Lo yariv Hashem nefesh tzadik v'havos rushaim yehadof." Hashem will not starve the soul of a tzaddik, and the second half of the pasuk is like subject to like a 8-way machloka, so I'm not even going to translate that. Hashem will not starve the soul of a tzaddik. So on the surface, it sounds like it means that Hashem will not allow a tzaddik to go hungry. Okay, but the Me'iri gives this long explanation about how if a tzaddik eats healthy foods, then that will be conducive to the tzaddik's soul activities, okay, like learning and such, and that the Rasha basically just eats for pleasure and he's not going to be sustained. So he ends up saying, and he ends up taking this idea that the tzaddik should only eat things that are nutritionally sound that contribute to his like physical and mental health. So he says, "V'lachein hatzaddik af im yimale beso kesef v'zahav lo yivakesh hamosar." Oh, sorry, and not even just for food, but like all of his needs. If a tzaddik, even a tzaddik, if he fills his house with gold and silver, he will not seek excess. And he'll be content in his food and in his other bodily pleasures with that which is necessary for him. And he will constantly evaluate to provide himself with what his natural needs are. Then he'll always be satisfied, as Chazal say, Mar Ivo Savea. Okay, and this matter is ascribed to Hashem. All natural phenomena are ascribed to God. And it's as if our pasuk is saying that the tzaddik will not go hungry because he's taking care of his needs. So in other words, and this is just one example, but this comes up all over Mishlei, that Mishlei ascribes things that are outside of your bechirah to Hashem. So that fits in with what we were saying here, that you have your bechirah and your plans, but whether or not the plans, come to fruition is dependent on all these factors outside of your control, which are being called Yad Hashem. Okay, so that's the premise of my interpretation. Now here's my interpretation. Okay, the king thinks that he can do whatever he wants, but really it's dependent on external factors, and the most important factor is the will of all of the people who he either governs or who are opposing him, and really it's up to them. And because his chief concern is to maintain his power, so then it really is like less free will than the average person, because it's his psychology of wanting to maintain power interacting with all these other psychology, the psyches of all the people, which most people are not making free will decisions. Most people are just operating based on their psyche. Like the Rambam says, most human beings are either behemos or chayos. They're either domesticated animals or wild animals. And so it's just like the mashal that I've given before. Have you ever seen those videos of like the room filled with mouse traps with ping pong balls in them?
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay. So whatever. I'll send the video into the chat. But like, you basically throw one ping pong ball into the whole thing, and then they all start snapping off, and then they all shoot all their ping pong balls, and all the traps go off. So it what was that? Yeah, trampoline, similar thing, but you don't get that satisfying snap of the mouse trap. All the mouse traps. Okay, fine. So if you look at that, it looks random. Okay, but theoretically, in a Newtonian world, if you were able to like measure the exact trajectory of that first ping pong ball and exactly where all those things are set up, it really is just playing out in Newtonian, mechanics, like and laws of nature, and it's all deterministic. Just looks random. So same thing with the king, that the king thinks that he's making all these decisions, but really it's just his psyche interacting with everyone else's psyches, and it's just going to play out however it plays out. And there are a few people who have free will, but typically speaking, they're not going to be able to exert influence on the entire trajectory of how the melucha goes, unless they themselves are the king. Okay, and that's why you have people like David and Melech on the one end of the spectrum and Yeravam ben Navat on the other end of the spectrum, who are actually using their free will and are actually like exceptions to the rule in many senses, is that they are actually like determining how things go. But most kings don't have free will. And so my political position is I'm a Mishlei fatalist, in that I think that by and large, what we do cannot affect the direction that our country goes in. You know, what you need is, if you are a person who is exercising your free will to actually take a position of leadership, then you can affect what happens to your country. But the average person cannot. It's just going to go in the direction of wherever all the psyches go. You know, so that's like, and I'm not saying, you know, like obviously like on a local level, then you could argue that there is more control. Like if you don't want to put a stoplight at the end of Reed's Lane, and like you can, you know, and like you can actually vote on, in that, but like arguably that's the same phenomenon. It's just, you know, not as weighty. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there are many examples throughout history that you could find individual acts affecting greater whole. Like I don't know, even in Serbian France, for example.
Oh, so I'm not denying that there are acts that can affect the greater whole. I'm saying that those acts are not free will. In most cases, meaning in most cases it's reactionary, either reacting to internal dynamics or to external pressures. You know, you find very few cases where it's actual exercise of free will. You know, and that's why I'm saying that this is saying that the heart of the king is in the hand of Hashem. You know, more so than everyone else, because he's the king is really the nexus. We get to use the fancy word nexus of all the psyches of everyone in the land. You know, like, and so it's going to play out from his own dynamics and then everyone else's dynamics. You know. Yeah.
Who's the audience?
So the audience is a good question. I think the audience could be both the king or the people. You know, it's the king in the sense that for the same reason that we were saying the Havamina, that the king thinks he has the most free will in the land and the most control, when really he has to realize his will is subject to all these forces beyond his control. You know, including his very kingship. I forgot to mention that also, is like the whole thing about the what's that famous line? Consent of the governed. What's the? Hold on. Consent of the governed in. What's the line? Oh, that's the same idea. Yeah, I'm just looking. Isn't there a famous line that this phrase comes from? Okay, I don't know. Whatever. But the point is that the king is so much in the control of these forces of the people that if they wanted to, then they could end his kingship whenever they wanted to. You know, it's just that typically you can't unify them in a way that they do that. You know, so it's for the king to keep in check his own omnipotence fantasy, like we were saying before, and it's also for the people, is that I think people have this irrational fear or admiration of the king, feeling like they rely on his omnipotence as well, for good or for bad. You know, but they have to realize it's really not in the king's control. It's really in Hashem's control, you know, in the sense that there are all these factors that are beyond free will of each individual, you know. So if you're going to ask practically what the practical ramification is, so for the king, the practical ramification is to moderate his decision-making hubris by taking this into account, you know, and submitting his will to Hashem, you know, like all the good kings did, and all the bad kings failed to do, and being especially on guard against that type of like trust in his own omnipotence. And then for the people, it's an interesting question what the practical ramification is, other than like an emotional practical ramification of like not fearing the king excessively. Oh, I didn't realize we were over time. So let's stop here for now, and then tomorrow we can go through the meforshim. Okay, and I'll send you the article I wrote expressing this idea, but I'll also send you the ping pong video. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. This document. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
All right. See you, Isaac.
I'm gonna schedule for Elizabeth.
Okay. Good.